That. All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about business success and what it's like to break through the six-figure barrier. We're going to find out some real juicy, practical information. This way, I'm going to redo that. Let me try that again.
Sure.
Thank you to everyone who's listening while I get this part right. Today, we're going to talk about business success, what it takes to break the six-figure business barrier, and find out some juicy and practical information found in Mark's book, Find Your 20. So thanks for joining us today, Mark.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I just read the book, and I think there's a lot of juicy content in there. So just a little bit about Mark. Mark Sieverkrop has a passion for helping business owners identify the hidden opportunities and unrecognized challenges in their business, and then create a plan to capitalize on the opportunities and address the challenges. He has worked in the online business, affiliate management, and business coaching industries with industry leaders such as Michael Hyatt, Ray Edwards, Lewis Howes, Jeff Goins, Claire Diaz-Ortiz, Shark Tank's Kevin Harrington, Ziegler Inc., Happy Family, and others. He has worked with and coached over 145 5, 6, and 7-figure business owners from as far away as Japan, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Belgium, England, Canada, the United States, and many other countries. His clients have included business coaches, life coaches, agency owners, brick and mortar business owners, course creators, weight loss and fitness professionals, homeschool curriculum creators, and numerous other types of businesses in various niches. Mark is the founder of the Focus to Scale Mastermind, a coaching and mentorship program designed specifically to help six-figure business owners have the focus, accountability, and encouragement necessary to create a successful business that serves them, their interests, and their family. When he's not consulting with and coaching business owners, Mark loves spending time with his wife and children, watching, coaching, and officiating soccer, geocaching, and working out. Well, that sounds like a pretty full life, Mark.
It is most days.
Well, it is. So I'm just curious. Let's just go back to the beginning of your business. What did you like? Whatever led you to start a business?
That's a great question. So for me, I think I always felt like I wanted to own my own business. I didn't realize it growing up, but looking back, I realized that my dad's a farmer, which means that he's a small business owner, which means that he works when he decides he wants to work. He can not work when he decides he wants to not work. And he has control of his life. And, within reason, he's a farmer. So, there's times of the year where he's working a lot, but he could always make time for the things that he wanted to. We took a vacation every year. We did all these things. And so I think from an early age, that was something that was important to me. I don't do well being told what to do. And so when I first started my business, it was really being a contractor for a friend of mine. And it was the opportunity to work from home. It was the opportunity to have my own schedule, to define when I worked. I had certain things I needed to do for him, but he didn't really care whether I started work at 8 or I started work at 10, or if I had to go watch the kids at a choir concert, or a school concert or something. And so that's really where it started, was just that desire to have control of my own schedule and to be able to do the things that I wanted to do, because that's what I had seen growing up.
Well, there's lots of lessons from that farming industry.
There is, yeah.
You mentioned there's times of the year that he worked a lot, and there was hard work to do. And in farming, you're dependent on some outside forces. Mm-hmm. You can decide you're going to go. Did he do grain farming?
Yeah. My dad he does dryland wheat, and then he also raises beef cattle. So he's got both sides of it. So a lot of farmers, they get the winter off. My dad doesn't, because that's when he's feeding cows and taking care of cows. So it's like he just goes from one to the next.
Yeah. And that February, March calving season.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Out out of the middle of the night to
Mhm.
in the freezing cold to go find the new cows. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of parallels for any kind of business because
Yeah.
we all have that time, that those times of it's really busy and I'm not getting a lot of sleep and I wish I could get more sleep. And then there's times of rest that
Yeah.
it isn't a true balance of, 6 hours of day, however many days a year that you work. Uh, One of the ways that somebody described it recently that I thought was a nice way of putting it was work life harmony as
Mhm.
opposed to work life balance that we don't ever achieve really balance.
Yeah.
It's harmony, and so that's your dad was a great mentor in that way.
Mhm.
And you're also a recipient as a son
Mhm.
of the benefits of that business. So, would you share with us 2 or 3 lessons that you've learned about building a business?
Mm. I think there's a lot of them. I'm trying to think of what ones that are the most important or the ones I want to share. I think one of them that I've realized is how what you do builds on where you're going. I think a lot of times we want things to happen right away. And what I've learned is I'm in a season of my business, or I'm doing certain things in my business for a certain reason, and that builds on the next one. So people that I've met in working with previous clients have came back and have been clients of mine, or they've helped me in some way, or I've gained a skill that I needed. You and I were talking about that before we got on, just like how sometimes it feels like we're starting over, but we have like either the expertise that we've learned or a skill that we've learned or people that we've connected with. And so I think that's one of the first lessons I would share is just like things happen for a reason. And I don't think it ever happens as fast as we want it to. We always want it to be faster. We always say, why isn't it happening faster? Why am I not getting to where I want to? But when I look back, I see this like very clear, I don't want to say very clear, but certainly discernible line of, oh, I met this person and now they're helping me with this, or I learned this and that allowed me to do this and allowed me to move on to the next thing. So I think that's the first thing is just understanding that no matter where you are in your business at any one time, there's things that you learn and there's things that you're developing and skills that you're developing that prepare you for the next thing you need to do. I was reading an article from Russell Brunson recently, and he talked about that, about how we always think that the opportunity we're in right now or the thing we're doing right now is the thing. Like that's the thing that's going to make the difference. And he's like, sometimes it is, but most of the time it's just getting you to the next thing and it's preparing you for the next thing. And it takes a while, And so I think that's the first one. I think the next one, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to my book, but the next one is the importance of really being clear on what your parameters are in your business. I started, like I said, I started working for myself because having time freedom was important to me. Being able to decide to pick my kids up from school or being able to decide to go watch a Christmas performance. I did that yesterday morning. Those things were important to me. But what I realized after a couple years in is I hadn't set clear parameters. I hadn't set boundaries. And all of a sudden I was working like I was in a job. I was working, 8 to 5 every single day. And I was working on Saturdays a lot of times. And I was working on the evenings because something needed to be done because I hadn't been clear on when do I work? When do I not work? What are my non-negotiables? What do I have to make sure that's important? And that's one of the things that I've really learned and embraced in my business is you have to be clear about what you want your business to look like if you're ever going to get there. I had the experience it's probably 4 years ago now. I was talking to a friend of mine. And at the time, my daughter was doing horse shows, competitive horse shows. And so 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, we'd be gone from Wednesday to Saturday or Wednesday to Sunday. And during those times, I told my friend, I said, it'd be amazing if I could just work like 20 to 25 hours a week, make what I make now, so that those weeks when I have to take my daughter to a horse show or there's a soccer tournament, it wasn't a big deal. I could do that and manage that. And I just kind of said it. I didn't think much about it. But then a couple of years later, I looked back and realized that I'd pretty much created that schedule. Like I've created the schedule where I can take my kids to school any day that I need to. Sometimes, a lot of times my wife does, but if I need to, if she needs me to, I can because I don't start work until 9 or 10 in the morning. And then I've set up my schedule to where I don't do calls after 2 o'clock because my kids get out of school at 3 and I need to be able to go get them sometimes. And so it's really nice to have been able to create those parameters to where if my wife says, hey, I'm working late today, or hey, I'm having lunch with a friend, can you pick up the kids? It's like, yeah, sure, no problem. Because I've set that schedule. Now, if I don't have to do that, sometimes I'll work later and I'll work till 4 or 5, but I don't have to. Like, I don't have a set thing that I'm doing where I have to be there. And so that's the second one I would say, is just being clear on what you want and what you want your business to look like, because, chaos doesn't, or, order doesn't come out of chaos. And so you can't not define those parameters and expect someday to have work-life harmony, like you talked about, which I love that, because you're right. There's no such thing as balance. Sometimes, some weeks I work more, some weeks I spend more time hanging out with my kids or doing things with my wife or whatever it is. And that's just the way life goes. But if you don't have those parameters to start with, you can't have that flexibility, because, one of the things that I think I say in my book is, work is a really, really great servant. It's a terrible master. It will take every moment of your life if you let it. And there's always something else to do. There's always an email to respond to. There's always something to fix. And if you're not clear on those parameters, it'll take over.
Yeah, that's wonderful. A couple of wonderful lessons there. And what I really like is that vision of your business, and knowing not only who you want to work with and how you want to help them, but how that impacts the rest of your life, and making the business fit into your life instead of making your life fit into your business. It's how does that work with your clients? In what I'm thinking is, I know someone else who teaches a lot about that dream client and your dream business. So he talks about, or I think one of the fears that comes up when somebody starts to say, and I'm not going to work past, or I'm not going to take a client call past 2 o'clock, or, having that flexibility, is that, what do I do when a client wants those extra? That they say, well, I can't make it till 4 o'clock. Can you meet at 4 o'clock? How do you handle that within your business, of having the people find you who respect those kinds of boundaries?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And, the first thing I'll say is I reserve the right to schedule calls later if I want to. And there are certainly times that I do. I mean, yesterday I had a client that I actually had to move our call because it was right after one of my kids' Christmas program was supposed to be done at the school. And I'm like, I don't want to have to sneak out. My son's going to be the last one singing. So I'm like, I don't want to miss it. So I said, hey, can we reschedule? And she said, well, I can't reschedule until this time. And it was like 3:30 my time. And so I scheduled it then. And I made that decision. And so I reserve the right to do that at times. So every once in a while I will. But I think the few things I would say about that is, one, I think if you're very clear about what your parameters are and what your priorities are, people respect that. And I think you start to attract those type of people. I can tell you, for me, most of my clients are also people who have families, and they understand the importance of that. And they certainly are okay with that. So like yesterday when I emailed that client, or a couple of days ago, I emailed her and said, hey, my kids have their Christmas program. Is it okay if we move this call? She was like, yeah, absolutely. That's so important. That's so neat that you can do that. So they're cool with it. And so I think a lot of times you'll attract those people that align with your values, because you're sharing those values, you're talking about them. And so they're willing to adjust to that. And if you say, and I talk about it a lot, I'll share a lot of times that, like, I don't take calls after 2 o'clock typically, because I want to be able to pick up my kids from school if I need to. And so I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it's just being clear about what the priority is. And if there's a client, I'm in the middle of that right now. I have a potential client that can only meet in like the afternoons or evenings. And I'm like, do I really want to work with them? It's not that I don't want to work with them, but it's like, do I really want to make that trade-off? I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But I think it allows you, having those parameters to start with, allows you to have that conversation with yourself, rather than just kind of creeping in. You can say, this is the boundary. Am I willing to adjust that or not? And the other thing I'll say is, for me, anytime I take a call outside those hours, so if I'm taking a call early in the morning or I'm taking a call later in the afternoon, I'll talk to my wife about it and I'll say, hey, do you need me to get the kids this day? Do you have anything going on? Is there anything that I need to be aware of? And I'll check that first. And if she's like, nope, I've got them, it's good, I can pick up the kids. Okay, great. Do you mind if I have a call at this time? She's like, yeah, that's fine. She rarely cares. I mean, even calls, if I have them in the evening, she typically, if it's just every once in a while, it's not a big deal. So I think it's just being clear on that, and then having the confidence to know that if it's supposed to work, it will, and if it doesn't, fit. I mean, I'm trying to think who it was telling this story. I heard somebody tell a story about a client they had who essentially the same kind of thing, had decided that they didn't want to do calls on Fridays. They didn't want to work on Fridays because that their kid was out of school. And so they wanted to spend time with their kid. I think they were a single parent. And it was like the next week after they made that decision, got an offer for a contract, biggest contract they'd ever had. I think she did like corporate consulting. And they said, we want to do these calls on Friday, or these meetings on Friday. And so she calls her coach and she's like, what do I do? And, he just said, well, why did you not want to work Fridays? Well, I want to be able to spend time with my son. That's important to me. That's a priority. And he's like, okay, so what should you do? And she decided that she was just going to say, I'm sorry, I can't do this contract. So she said that. And I think it was a couple of days later, they came back and said, okay, well, we'll move things around and we can make it work on another day. And so I think sometimes sticking to your priorities, people respect that. They understand. And I had this conversation with a client of mine the other day. He does like, it's not physical therapy, but it's similar, like some sort of like movement therapy type thing. And he's always like, well, people call me and they need to meet. They want to meet at like 5 p.m. or they want to meet at this time. And, I just feel bad if I can't make it work. And I said, you know what? I said, when I go to the doctor, if they say I've got an appointment at this time on this day, you know what I say? Okay. And if they say, I'm sorry, we don't have anything until 3 weeks from now, I say, okay. So I think when you have that clear boundary and you take a stand, I guess you could say that, people respect that and they understand. Like there's a lot of places in our life where we just say, okay, that's what you have, then that's what you have. Like I never push back with my doctor or my chiropractor and say, no, like you've got to open a spot for me. No, I don't, because I know that that's the times they have and that's the way it is. And so if you set that boundary and you just say this is when I'm available, most people will make that work. And I've had that happen. I've had clients, I block off for client calls. I almost never do calls on Friday. I have like every other Thursday blocked off. And so there's times where clients will be like, well, I've got to fit it in here, or I'll just, I'll make it work. And I'm like, okay, and I don't feel bad about it because that's the boundaries I've set. And I think that's just being willing to keep the commitment to yourself is important. And just recognizing if it's not a fit, then it's not a fit. That's okay. It's okay. I don't need every client in the world.
Yeah, that's awesome advice, because I know I've struggled with that at times, especially in leaner times, like, gee, I could really use another client. And I think many of the people listening today would feel that way at some point in time.
Yeah.
Maybe with some of the clients you work with, moving into 6 figures, maybe that boundary is more clear for them, and maybe it's part of what keeps them a little fuzzy as well. But I think that's what I really liked, was saying, keep the commitment to yourself, and that those are some pretty powerful words, and that things will, and having the faith that things will work out. Mm-hmm. And it is amazing when, and maybe it shouldn't be so amazing, but I think we feel it's amazing when we say, I can't make that work. And they come back to us and say, okay, we'll figure out how to make it work. Mm-hmm. That we aren't always closing doors.
Right.
When we keep that commitment, that sometimes it opens different doors, and maybe more of the right ones.
Yeah.
From what you've said too. So I really like that. Thank you. So you've worked with some very high level clients. Can you share just, maybe one memorable moment from one of those high level clients? you'd like to share?
Sure. There's this one. No, I was like, tell a bad story. No, I mean, I think in general, I think the interesting thing has been just realizing that they're normal people. And I do have also I have a specific experience I'll share with you, but I think that's one of the ones that's been really cool to me. So I had an experience. This wasn't the one. Actually, I have another one I'm going to tell, but can I tell too? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this wasn't a client per se, but a mutual person that both you and I know, Jeff Walker.
Mhm.
Um, he was promoting something that we were running the affiliate program for, and so because of that, I had his phone number, and I was giving him updates at the end of this launch one time because he was battling with somebody else to win this launch, and so it was like I was watching the stats all night, and I was updating him and updating somebody else, and they were checking him. As those people are very competitive. Like they're very, then they want to win. And so I was doing that during a launch, and then the next day he sent me a text at like 10 in the morning. He's like, "Hey, just curious how things turned out. Like, where did we end up?" And I texted him back, and I said, "Hey Jeff, I'll let you know in about an hour." I said, "I'm actually at my kids' Christmas performance." It was like right this time of year. And I said, "I'm actually at the school, watching my kids sing." I said, "No, so I'll get back to you in like an hour when I get home." And then I just said like launch life, right? And just kind of haha, because that's what Jeff always says.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." He goes, "Those are great times. I remember that with my kids." And so it was neat to just see like they're just normal. Like they're just normal people. They have the same experiences, the same feelings, the same, passions and things that they love doing. And it was funny. So this is the funny part. He actually mentioned that in one of his videos on YouTube like the next week. And it's like my favorite thing ever to tell people, because he doesn't say who it is, but he's like, "Yeah, I was texting with a work colleague recently, and he was talking about how he's at his kid's Christmas performance, and he responded and just said #launch life, and and I'm like, it's me, I'm a work colleague," and it was like really cool. But so I think that was one of those where it just reminded me like, yeah, these people, they're on stage, they have tons of people following them. They're just normal people. Like they have the same worries and excitements and everything that we have. But the story that I wanted to share was actually when we were working with Kevin Harrington. And so Kevin Harrington was the original shark from Shark Tank. He was on season 1 of Shark Tank. He owns the As Seen on TV brand. He started the infomercial. He's just super, super interesting guy. And we were at an event because we were running a launch for him and Zig Ziglar's company. And so as part of that, we were all in Nashville, and we got to sit down and have lunch with him and his son. And the thing that was cool was, again, just how down to earth he was. But I was blown away by how knowledgeable he was about everything. Like he could go from telling a story about working with Billy Mays, like the old infomercial guy, to talking about like the New York Jets, I think, and what they were doing in football. And it was like he knew everything. And so I asked his son about that. And his son was, I don't know, 25 or something. And he's, works with him and everything. But I said, "How does he know so much?" And he said, "My dad reads like 6 newspapers every single morning." And just that realization of, you hear that about people like Warren Buffett talks about how, he reads 4 to 5 hours a day. And I don't think we realize how important like that level of just learning and wanting to learn and wanting to understand things and wanting to be able to converse with people is to being successful. And that's one thing that just really, really stuck out to me and impacted me from interacting with Kevin. And also I always feel bad like getting pictures with people like that, because I know everybody wants their picture. So I have no picture evidence of me having lunch with Kevin Harrington, but I did,
Uh,
I promise. And it's funny because it's like I was more worried about just sitting and listening to him and hearing what he had to say and the way he looked at things. And but yeah, that's a story that I love telling, and it's kind of a fun experience.
yeah. Well, those are a couple of really memorable moments for sure.
Yeah.
I can see Jeff just being thrilled that somebody's having their launch life and
Hmm.
being able to do what they want to do. And, I sure don't know Kevin Harrington to know, but I imagine, I can only imagine how wonderful that conversation was. And I think if
Super neat.
there's one lesson that I get out of that maybe others would as well, is the importance of listening as well. That when we have the opportunity to be with a mentor or with a high level client, or and we have that opportunity to listen, that sometimes that's the best thing for us, as opposed to peppering them with questions, is, asking maybe a few questions, but really getting them to be able to share. I did that once. I don't even know who I listened to that suggested doing that. It was a number of years ago when I was doing some different kinds of leadership training. So who knows what I was listening to at the time? I can't remember. But they talked about that, about finding somebody that's doing what you want to do and having, an interview with them. And so I contacted a person who had facilitated a workshop I attended, and I really liked the work that he was doing and wanted to know more about how he wanted to build his business. And I was working with a couple of local people here. We were trying to start up a little training group. So we drove 3 hours to meet with him and have supper with him. And he said, like, in the 20 some years that he'd been doing business, nobody had ever done that.
Wow. So,
for anyone who's listening, like that, and this was before Facebook was even around. It was that long ago. We have so many ways that we can connect with people now, that, to, ask for a 10-minute phone call to hear what they have to say. But you can gain so much knowledge in a short amount of time and learn a lot of lessons by asking a couple of questions and listening a lot.
Well, most people don't take those opportunities. I don't know that happens quite as much anymore, but I remember a few years ago, it was like a normal thing. Any podcast you listen to, there was a lot of people that they'd say, well, how can people get in contact with you? Like, oh, just here's my email address. And most people never did it. Like, most people never reached out. And I always made a point to do that. Like, I would send an email, and even if it was just, hey, really appreciated what you shared on this podcast. I just wanted to let you know I was listening to it. And it was neat. Like, I had so many cool experiences where I connected with people that way. And, there was different ones I would ask, and I'm like, how many people actually reach out to you? And they're like, very few. And it's like, why not? If they're inviting you to connect with them, why not? The worst that's going to happen is they say no, or they don't respond. Like, it's not, you get those opportunities, like having supper with somebody, like, that's what happens when you just reach out.
That great advice. So I hope somebody contacts you after this one.
Yeah.
Sure. So let's move on to your book. So you wrote the book for business owners. There it is. And entrepreneurs who are approaching 6 figures annual income, or they're approaching 6 figures in annual income, or already are at 6 figures but feel like they're stuck, they're plateaued. So they're either near or around 6 figures. Perfect. Awesome. So I just want to go back to the book for a second. Or maybe you can just tell me the promise of your book. I was going to read it just so that
you would ask, wouldn't you? What is the promise of my book? No, actually.
Well, it's kind of nice when it's just right in the book. I'm almost there.
I've got it now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big promises is just to have a shorter, more focused to-do list. And this kind of came from there. I know you've probably had these experiences too. You go to a conference, you go to a workshop, you go to a retreat, and you come back with this long list of things to do. And most of them never get done. Like, everything we do in our life seems like it adds things. And so the goal of the book is really to identify the most important things that you need to be doing, and to create that shorter, more important list. And it's not that you don't do all the other things, but it's, let's do these things first and prioritize the things that are most important. So that's really the goal, is that you're going to, by the end of it, rather than having this list of a million things that you need to do, It's what are the 5 or 10 really important things that are actually going to move the needle in your business.
Yeah. And I would say after reading the book that like it is a nice simplified method of doing that so that you can easily, and I imagine most of the time, without even bringing in emotion to it, because sometimes we're emotionally tied for some reason to different things that we want to do. And, even if it's just because it feels better or it's easier, there's just all those reasons that we would focus on something else. But I wanted to quote one of the testimonials and then decided that I couldn't because there wasn't, they all talked about your ability to distill the information down, make it simple, make it actionable, make it achievable so that they get the results. And that's what I got from reading the testimonials. And that's certainly what I got from the book as well. And, we do live in a world that's got there's many ways to pull us away from what is important, or even is masked as important that really isn't. So it's nice. It truly is, just do this. And then once you've done that, do this, and there comes a point where there's, certainly implementation on certain parts that, you've offered help throughout your book on how to do some of those things. So that's awesome. But I'm curious, you listed 5 things that people would have if they implement what you talk about in the book. One is to have more clarity on what the most important things are on your to-do list. Understand the areas of your business that are most important for you to focus on. Identify the products or services that contribute the most to your bottom line. Uncover the activities that are robbing you and your business of revenue and profit. And have a plan to move your business forward immediately towards greater efficiency, profit, and success. So out of those 5, is there one that you found contributes more to success than another, or that you see more that's more common? It might be a bigger like it's just the common obstacle, or it might be the one that most people get success on. Is there one that you would pick out of there that?
I think one of them, if I was to pick 2, I would say it's having the clarity of what's most important, and it's focusing on the things that contribute most to the bottom line, which really tie together. I think a lot of times we think we know what's most important, but when you really sit down and ask yourself what's most important, you realize that, like you said, sometimes there's that emotion and we think something's most important and we think we have to do it. We think it's going to generate revenue. But when you really ask the question, this is the question I ask a lot in my book, is, what things most directly and substantially contribute to revenue? And as business owners, we have to generate revenue. That's why our business is in business, is to generate revenue and provide for us and our clients and everybody else. And so I think it's having that clarity of those things and being able to sit back and say, what is the thing that generates most revenue? What is the thing that makes the biggest impact in my business? Because I think a lot of times, and this is what I've seen with my clients, they get in these positions where they're doing so much, they're running from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and we just get in this, there's the analogy or the example of, a hamster in a hamster wheel. We're just running. We don't know where we're running, but we're just running. We've got things to do and we have to get things done. And there's a never ending to-do list of things. And we never stop and say, what's most important? What's getting the most bang for my buck? It's the whole book is based on the premise of the 80-20 principle, which is that a majority of your results come from a minority of the things that you do. And that's a difficult thing to wrap our heads around sometimes, because that also means that the majority of our time, we're not really doing much, which is something most of us don't want to admit, because then we feel like we're not being effective. And that's something I've struggled with. Yeah, I've struggled with that. It's And, when I was talking with my friend about working less, I said, I think one of my biggest challenges with working less is if I can work less and make the same amount of money, that means I'm being really inefficient right now. And I don't want to admit that. I don't want to admit that I'm wasting my time most of the day right now. But the fact of the matter is most of, 80/20 principle says, and that's what this book is about, is 20% of the tasks you're doing generate 80% of the revenue, which means on the flip side, you could get rid of 80% of what you're doing and still make most of the revenue that you're making right now.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful thought. And it's true. Like it's true. I think you mentioned that basically that means we could work 1 day a week
Yeah.
and
I mean,
achieve.
1 out of 5 is 20%, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that sounds really enticing,
right.
really,
Well,
to think about that.
and it's important to realize that, the 80/20 isn't hard and fast. So it's not always 80/20. Sometimes it's 30/10. Sometimes it's 90 or 30/70, I guess it would be. That was really bad math. Or, 90/10. But the principle is still the same. Like most of the time, and I know I look at my days, most of the time, honestly, I'm not doing the highest priority things. Checking Facebook, I'm checking my email, I'm switching tasks instead of just focusing on the thing that's most important. And you think about, Zig Ziglar always talked about the day before vacation and all the things you can get done the day before you go on vacation. So what if we
Yeah.
did that all the time? Like what if we always had that focus? And I'll be the first to admit I struggle with that too. And I think that's why, this is a process that I encourage my clients to go through like quarterly, because it's important to have that reset of, okay, where do I need to focus my time? Where have I fallen down? Where have I haven't done as well as I should? And to recalibrate, because as humans, we need that. We need that readjustment. So yeah, it's just an ongoing process.
Yeah. And I think that can be comforting for people to know that, I mean, number one, they're not alone in that struggle. And I
Mhm.
think that I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that struggle, but it's that, a little bit of that saying of comparing your front end to somebody's back end. We see the front end that looks like it's all organized and it just seems to be perfect, where our back end is messy,
Yep.
and somebody else's back end is messy as well.
Yep.
uh, you know but we don't always see that, and we don't always acknowledge it, that other people are having those struggles, and that it's ongoing. It's not, you don't just fix it and you're fine.
Right.
uh, it, and maybe there's going to be some habit expert that comes out that really finds the right habits to get through that permanently. But I think it's a you mentioned in the book, the recalibration piece.
Mhm.
That recalibration every quarter is so important. And I love that, by the way, that the recalibration, because I don't know, at least I haven't found a lot of people who talk about that,
Mhm.
as far as an actual step. They may give some, they may talk about a little bit, just in a conversation or in a general training or something, but it's not an actual step. Maybe more in the business world. I think it's maybe they're a little bit more in the business world, but I just like it in your four pillars, that recalibration is there. It's not just get on the highway and just keep going 100 kilometers an hour forever. Well, okay,
Mhm.
miles.
Right.
Yeah, that's 60
Either
miles an
way.
hour. 65, I think. But one of
Yep.
the quotes, and I think this is something that at least most of the people who are in my world and who would be listening, that this is also an important part of business. And so I pulled this quote out from the book. It is one of my most firmly held beliefs that your business should serve you rather than being a slave to your business. Just can you talk about that a little bit and what that means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's some of the things that we've already been talking about. But when I think about it, anybody that starts a business, there's something you want from it. Like nobody starts a business saying, I wanna have to work a ton of hours and be miserable and all of these. Like we have these goals, we have these desires, we have these dreams. It's either time freedom or it's money freedom or it's impacting the world in some way. And a lot of that has to do, at least with the people that I want to serve. I know there are hustlepreneurs that it's all about the grind and getting up at 3 a.m. and all of those things. I'm not that person. Like I started my business, like I said, to have that time freedom, like to be able to support my family and do those types of things. And when we forget that the purpose of our business is to serve us, then that's when we get miserable. That's when we start to resent our business. That's when we start to wish we were doing something else because we've forgotten that it's supposed to serve us. It's supposed to give us time off. It's supposed to provide financial rewards. It's supposed to do all of these things because otherwise, why would you do it? Like what's the payoff for all of the risk that we take as business owners? I think, when we have, an information business or a coaching business, there's certainly less risk, there's less, things like that. But I think about like my in-laws restaurant. It's funny because, employees always get frustrated because, my in-laws cannot be there most of the time and they don't have to be there and they get paid whether they're there or they're not there. But what those employees don't realize is the risk that's being taken on. If something goes wrong, my in-laws are the ones that have to be there. If, somebody calls in sick, they're the ones that have to show up and drop what they're doing. There's all of this risk that we take as business owners. And the benefit of that is that our business serves us, that it provides things for us, whatever that is. And for each of us, that's different. But I think a lot of times we forget that that's the case. We forget that that's the goal of the business. If there's no reward, why would you put up with the risk? Why would you put the risk? Why would you put in all the time if it didn't mean that you got to take a vacation? If it didn't mean that, after you and I get done talking and I finish my next call, that I'm not working again for 2 weeks, I'm not working till the beginning of the year. Those are the benefits. And so having that mindset and being okay with that, I think sometimes we feel guilty, thinking that, oh, our business should serve us, but that's why it's there. Like that's why we started it. We had some goal. And I would encourage anybody that's watching this to ask themselves, what was that goal? When you started your business, why did you do it? What did you hope your business would provide you? What did you hope that you'd be able to do because of you having this business? And if it's not giving you those things right now, what do you have to change? Like, how do you have to adjust your parameters? How do you have to identify the most important tasks that you need to do or the most important products that generate the revenue so that it provides those things for you? Because if you don't get to that point, you'll resent it and you'll either stop trying, you'll crash dive with it and, run it into the ground, or you'll just give up and you go back to having a job. And I know people that have done that and they're like, I like it better because I don't have responsibilities. I can leave at 5 p.m. and be done. And that's fine for some people, but I think it's because they had forgotten that their business is supposed to serve them. They don't have to be there every hour of every day. They can take time off if that's what they want to do, as long as they create their business around that and allow themselves to do that.
Well, I thank you. Thank you so much for that. I agree with you that I think there's many, and me included, who have lost that. And I don't even know if I've ever thought of it that way. I'm a giver by nature. And so for me, and I think for many people, we go into business because we want to serve someone. And so much of the training, at least, in the marketing world, is about who do you want to serve? Who do you want to like there? And it's important. If you don't know who you want to serve, it's hard to build a good, profitable business. And yet to think about what comes back, besides the money. And this kind of circles back to what we talked about at the beginning about the vision and how it fits into your life, which I've been a big proponent of and looking at it that way, but I've not looked at it as it's serving me. And that has likely been one of my biggest ahas through the book and the whole thing is that, wait a minute, like it's serving me. the business is going to serve me. So I think that's such a valuable perspective, and shift, and that'll shift things for a number of people.
So I remember reading a book, I think it's called Love Works. It's by Joel Manby. He was CEO of a amusement park organic company or something. But he said one time that he said, your employee, and his whole point was like, treat your employees with love and respect. And he said, your employees will never treat your customers better than you treat them. And I think that applies to ourselves as well, because we're an employee of our business. Like we're the one doing the work a lot of times, and we will never be able to treat our customers any better than we treat ourselves as the employee of our business. And so, it's that whole idea of, before helping somebody else with their mask on the airplane, put your own on first. If you're worn out, if you're tired, if you don't feel like the business is providing what you need, then it's really, really hard to serve your clients at the level that you want to serve them at, because you're worried about yourself. Like the reason that they tell you to put your mask on first is because if you can't breathe, you can't help anybody else, and you're of no use to anybody else. And so I think that's where a lot of times we fall down. And I'm the same way. Like I love serving my clients. I want to be able to serve them. I want to be able to help them. But I also recognize that if I'm exhausted, if I'm stressed about money, if I'm frustrated because I'm missing my kids' activities, I'm not going to be fully present with my clients, and I'm not going to be able to serve them the way that I do. So I think remembering that we're never going to serve our clients any better than we serve ourselves. We take care of ourselves.
Yeah. And I mean, you talked about that at the beginning, about that, like the creating the boundaries piece, and what works for you is, so yeah, I think we've come full circle, and I know we've got just a couple of minutes left. I just want to pull out one of the, I guess, well, how about I ask you, is there anything from the book that we haven't talked about already that you think is important and valuable for our listeners to hear?
I think we've hit on a lot of it. The final thing I'll say is what I end the book with, which is the experience that I had of realizing that, and you talk about wanting to help people and serve people. I have on my wall a sign that says "Just serve more people," and where that came from was I was frustrated with myself. I was frustrated with my business a couple of years ago. And as part of that, I was kind of praying, and I'm like, Heavenly Father, what do I need to do? Like, how do I serve more people? Like, that's what I want to do. I want to help more people. How do I do that? Like, I'm just not able to do it at the level that I want to. And the thought came into my mind, and it said, if you want to serve more people, just serve more people. Just do it. Like, why do you have to wait? And so I think that's one of the final things I would say is, my favorite quote of all time is the famous quote from Zig Ziglar: "You can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want." And that's been my experience. The time I just pour into people, and the times that I'm generous with my time. And I'm not saying give away your time all the time, but the times that I'm trying to help people, times that I experience success and I experience fulfillment. And a lot, sometimes it's the same thing. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes I feel fulfilled, and I don't necessarily feel like I had the success. That's okay, because it does come sooner or later. Those experiences come as long as you're just trying to help people. I've never once felt like I wasted my time or did something wrong or didn't get a result when I was focused on helping someone. Never once. Sometimes it becomes a client. Sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't matter. As long as I'm focused on serving them, there's always a benefit.
Awesome. Love that. Coming back to service. So what is the best, I wanted to be able to give you some time to talk about the Focus to Scale Mastermind, but I know that we've got like a minute. So if you wanted, share a little bit about that and how people can get a hold of you, where they can find the book.
Sure. So the book, you can go to findyour20.com/grab your copy. And if you're in the United States, I'm happy to mail you one, just cover shipping and handling. If you're outside, then either we can get you the ebook or you can grab it on Amazon and I'll get you all the bonuses. The other place, probably the easiest place to connect with me is actually just in the last few months created a Facebook group around Find Your 20. And I'm sharing a ton of free resources in there. As a matter of fact, in just a couple of weeks ago, I created like 2.5 hours, no, almost 2 hours of audio, like reviewing Dan Kennedy's 10 marketing rules. And so just gave it to people in there. So that's probably the easiest way to connect with me and interact with me is inside that group. You can go to, I think it's findyour20.com/group invite, totally free. Just come hang out with us. And we're always sharing ideas and building a community there to do that. So those are probably the easiest ways.
Awesome. Any final words or last thoughts?
I don't think so. I think it's just, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share some of these thoughts with you and with your audience. And yeah, I would just encourage people to just ask themselves, what do they want their business to do for them? And then to create the plan to get there.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you joined us. And I know that many people are going to have, a few different things to think about as they go into 2023, and we'll be able to make some changes that are going to be noticeable. You've got really simple, it's the steps are practical, like in the book, like it's easy. It's easy for people to do. So please go get your Find Your 20 book and get started on that. So thank you again, Mark, for being with us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.